Not wasting a second, I replaced my spyglass and roared for Lytton to take us about. He was confused by the order at first, but understood when he turned about and spotted the Goliath cannon rotating upward, its barrel training slowly towards the Hysteria. We all grabbed hold of the ship's railing as Lytton spun the wheel hard to starboard. The ship lurched about as we spun to face the valley below. Our flight path was swarming with drones, the purpose of which seemed to be merely to prevent us from preventing the cannon from firing, as they were consistently and deliberately flying into our cannon fire. Calling Salazar's bluff, I ordered full speed ahead and to direct fire upon the control box. Augustus, Lily, and Oft, who had switched from the stern to the bow turret, turned their guns downward and let loose relentless fire with means to destroy the controls. But their aim was still obnoxiously hindered by Salazar's drones, leaving the scientists unhindered in their operations. We continued to barrel towards the valley at full speed, the superweapon's aim following us all the while. As our guns continued to blare, the drones continued to fall, and soon enough of them had fallen that our aim was true. Oft's Gatling turret cut down both scientists in one sweep, and 2 of Lily's cannon shells demolished the control box. And if those things had happened just a few seconds earlier, it would have been a good thing. However, by the time we had dealt with the scientists, they had already initiated the particle charge sequence. Overhead, the Van de Graaff generators began to spark and crackle into ignition. The magnifying transmitter began to hum, and the electromagnetic crucible began to thunder with force. And with the scientists dead, and the control box destroyed, there was no way to open the crucible's fields, meaning the particles would be accelerated to the point of volatile molecular disruption, overloading the crucible and culminating in an explosion that would consume the better half of the northern hemisphere. Here again, I must pause and reflect upon the consequences of my decision on this occasion. Whilst retrospectively I can speculate on several alternative courses of action we could have taken, I cannot conceive of any that would not have cost the lives of one or all of my crew. These were sacrifices that I would not have made willingly, and even now I hesitate to admit that such courses of action may have been the wiser choice. Though had we given our lives in an effort to manually open the crucible's fields, I cannot say with certainty that we would have succeeded. What I can say is that had we failed in such an attempt, the terrible fate that befell this world would have happened much sooner. Perhaps the course of action that I decided we take was in fact for the best, but I am certainly not proud of that thought. Staring upward at the cyclopean machine gradually boiling itself towards detonation, I determined that, whatever the means, the ends must find the sword of Damocles as far away from there and then as possible at the point of meltdown. Assessing my recollection of the sword's schematics and the resources at our disposal, I devised a solution. I ordered Lytton to bring us above and about, so we were on level with the sword's hilt. It took every measure of Lytton's piloting genius to maneuver us past the howling gales created by the cannon's colossal propellers. As soon as we surpassed the propellers in altitude, the furious updraft nearly capsized us, but Lytton's steady hand on the wheel kept us level. He brought us alongside the sword's hilt at such proximity that we could feel the immense heat from the crucible permeating the brisk Arctic air. I called all hands to the main deck for to outline the following plan. We would board the shoulder constructs of the machine, two of us to each shoulder, and make our way to the rotary engines driving the propellers. I had seen in my brief glimpse of the Sword's blueprints that the rotary engines were powered by large alternators on either side of the magnifying transmitter. These alternators were connected to the rotary engines via wide, flexible conduit cables. We would disconnect said cables from the alternators and reconnect them to the magnifying transmitter, practically supercharging the rotary engines and spinning the propellers with such intense velocity that the machine would effectively shoot out of the troposphere. For good measure, we would also displace the cannon to the far-flung future when the planet is much less inhabited. This would be accomplished with the use of the Hysteria's quantum relativity clamps. When we have need to transport something through time that is too large to fit on board the ship, we employ the clamps to sink said object to the eternity clock, as a steamship tows wreckage with an anchor. The success of this plan would see the Sword of Damocles exploding 30 kilometers above Earth's surface and 30 million years into Earth's future. It was a brilliant plan, and if we had just a little more time in which to carry it out, it would have been much simpler. However, the inherent urgency of the situation made things very much less than simple. Whilst the relativity clamps would allow us to tow the cannon into the future, their use would require that we slow the movements of the eternity clock, and subsequently our relative passage through time to accommodate the mass of the cannon. This was risky. There was no way of knowing when the crucible would explode, and if it were to do so whilst we were still mid-passage, the damage to the chronosphere could be calamitous and irreparable. But it was our best chance. Lytton masterfully maneuvered the Hysteria around the neck of the cannon, allowing Oft and I to board the left shoulder, and Elsa and Augustus to board the right one. Once we had disembarked, Lytton brought the ship about once again to the center of the neck, hovering between the two shoulders. He and Lily set about fastening the relativity clamps to the cannon, whilst the rest of us worked hurriedly to redirect the power from the transmitter. Between the searing heat from the crucible and the blustering updraft from the propellers, we struggled to work fast and keep our balance. It took a considerable amount of focus and dexterity for Oft and I to pry open the alternator's protective armor with our hydraulic jaws of life. The cannon gave a slight lurch as we disconnected the cable from the alternator before the secondary power reserve took over. Oft and I held on for dear life as we inched our way around the narrow rim of the cannon's neck, holding the heavy cable under our arms. Elsa and Augustus were already waiting for us when we reached the large port, whereby the transmitter was accessible. To our fortune, the open cable junctions were immediately reachable behind the port. Oft and Augustus held the cables in position, only inches away from the junctions, whilst Elsa and I turned about and waved our arms madly at the Hysteria, giving Lily the signal to activate the eternity clock. Acknowledging the signal, Lily disappeared below deck, and a moment later, our passage began.